Greetings everyone, in this video we're going to be painting up one of my favourite miniature ranges outside of Games Workshop, and I'm also going to be demonstrating to you some unique gore effects that we can utilise within our miniature painting using oils and enamels. So avid viewers of this channel will know, and it'll be no secret, that I've recently purchased a 3D printer, and that has enabled me to have access to other miniatures and get quick access to them outside of the Games Workshop miniatures. Now obviously I love Grimdark and I love painting things in the Grimdark style, so for me there's no other better miniature sculptor person out there that makes STLs and prints these models, and you know, you can purchase them. If you've not got a 3D printer, you can purchase them directly from their website, and that of course is Bestiarum Miniatures, which is obviously going to be the miniature of choice from their Abhorrence range in this video. And now one of the questions that I keep getting asked on this channel, and I feel it's because a lot of people are now transitioning over to using like oils and enamels and painting in this Grimdark style, that they're not 100% because of that being used to painting with like acrylic paints and stuff, that they're not used to like oils and enamels and solvent based products, and a lot of myths. And a lot of people have been messaging me recently like, you know, what are they, how do we use it, what's this mineral spirits thing you talk about? So hopefully throughout this video I'm going to be able to explain that and also give you some tips on painting your miniatures. So first of all, as you can see on this miniature, I have primed it up in Stynylrez Grey Primer, and then I just got Screaming Skull from above, like a zenithal top-down like highlight, and put some Screaming Skull down, because I wanted more of like, even though it's got like that grey undertone from the primer, I also wanted it to be a little bit more of the highlights into like that bleached skin tone effect. Now one thing I'm doing here before we've applied even any oils or enamels or anything like that, as you can see, like there's a little bit of warmth going on the miniature, and these are just acrylic like washers. So this is a Citadel one, which is Reichland Flesh Shade, and I'm just using this in the airbrush, just working my way around certain sections of the miniature, like the sores and like these big boils that he's got at top. One, to like separate them and enhance them, and number two, it just gives them a little bit of depth and warmth to that skin tone. Because washers are transparent, that means that we can still see the skin underneath, which just sort of tints on what we call, like when we're Grimdark painting, like a filter. So this is the aim of like the goal from when I'm first laying down like my base colours and stuff. We've got that base colour of the skin tone on top, and now we're going to filter and adjust it and tint it into more of a colour that we desire. This in turn again will separate sections and give it a more realistic appearance. And because we've done the modelling first, like what the tip I gave earlier, like flicking different like coloured inks all around the body as well, because we're spraying over the top of these will slowly start to show through as we move further in the process, giving it the impression that some of those like mottles are sat underneath the skin. And then I've loaded up some Berserker Bloodshade, and there's nothing to stop you experimenting with different washers and inks and shades, and you can even use contrast paints to achieve the desired look that you want. And then after I've added some Berserker Bloodshade, and the nice thing that you can build them up slowly, so if I want them to be a little bit darker, then I can do that. And the reason I'm using this Berserker Bloodshade is because I want some areas to look a little bit sore, especially down on his arms where he's got like these growths and teeth coming out of it, around his mouth, and some of like the boils and stuff like that that you might see on the skin. When I'm painting my miniatures as well, I do like, again, like I've mentioned, experiment with the different colours, and to create like a different colour palette from the warmth, I want to push some cold tones into this miniature, and for that I've used a Colia Green shade, and I've angled the miniature down so it's like a reverse zenithal, so I'm spraying up into the shadows and around certain areas that I want to be shifted more into that cold tone. And overall this will just give your skin a more grimdark, awful, diseased look to it. And when you're done, you'll have something that looks a little bit like this. Now obviously you can see I've painted like the intestine areas, and for that I've just used Screamer Pink and just gone all over them and brushing up and feathering it up into the arms as well, and just to reinforce any like sore sections that I do want to do as well, especially around like the bottom of the feet where like the disease and like the blood starting to pool and stuff. That's sort of what I'm aiming for with this miniature. Now, an optional extra at this stage is to add some veins, and for this I've just used Druchii Violet again, which is another shade slash filter, whatever you want to call them, and I'm just adding some veins in and around the miniature, just really delicately, and following some of the veins that are already pre-existing on the miniature. And now this is the complete stage. This is like what I call sort of done and ready for like our washes and our effects and all that sort of stuff. And the whole thing here, even though it took like 5 minutes of the video, it literally took around that time, about 5 to 10 minutes to complete. And you can see how effective we've now got a miniature just by adding a simple prime and like a zenithal, and then just simply adding some filters through an airbrush. And now we're ready to move on to our next stage, which is adding some of the effects, oils, enamels, and little things to finish the miniature off. Really quickly, before we get into the next and final part of the video, there's a couple of things I want to quickly tell you about. So before we step into the enamels and I go over briefly of what they are and how to use some of them, I'd really highly recommend going over and checking out the Grimdark Compendium's latest video that they have got, and I'll leave links to that in the description below. They go highly into detail with everything, different ways that you can use it, and it's like an overall more in-depth look than what you'll probably get in this video. Also, if you are interested in picking up and grabbing hold of some of these bestiarium miniatures along with the painting guides for them, then the Grimdark Compendium does have a sale on at the moment where you can grab yourselves one of the starter sets along with the new Crimson Grove series. It's a 5-part episode where they go into depth and show you how to paint up the bestiarium miniatures, and also do a deep dive into the enamels themselves and how to get the best out of them for your miniature painting. And the beauty of it is you don't just have to apply it to the bestiarium miniatures. Everything that you'll learn along these techniques in these videos you can also apply to any of your painting projects. Also, if you are interested in some of the paints and stuff in the UK, then I have got affiliate links in the description below from Element Games. It just helps me get a little bit of a kickback, and then everybody is happy. You get your products, I get a little bit of a kickback, and it's just a way that you can thank me and this channel. So with that said, let's get straight back into the final part of this video. So basically, if you're not sure what enamels are, and I'm going to try and explain this not scientifically, I'm just going to try and explain it in a way that's easy for you to understand. So typically we paint with acrylic paints, and once they're on and they dried, which dry typically pretty quick, then they are on there permanent, and we can't really manipulate them unless we use like some solvents and stuff, but then we run the risk of going straight back down to the actual plastic itself. So when painting in the Grimdark style, and to achieve some of the effects that we want to achieve, we can start to use enamels and enamel products or oil products. Now these are solvent based paints, so that means we need something called mineral spirits. Now this mineral spirits, in essence, that's it, so that the paint itself is like an acrylic paint. However, if you imagine that the mineral spirits itself acts as like the water or the thinning agent, then that's what we're going to use to thin down our paints. And I'd highly recommend doing it on, if you're going to use it via brush, then I'd highly recommend using something like a flat tile or like a palette that you can mix those on, rather than those little tin dishes that everyone seems to use. So yeah, thanks for that colour paint. I think you guys set that one off. So with enamels as well, they obviously have a little bit more of a working time. They tend to dry a little bit slower, but you can speed that up by using obviously something like a hairdryer or something like that. Now the beauty of enamels is that that paint can, once it's dried, can be reactivated with the mineral spirit. So that once it's on there, let's say if we've got some that we don't want and we want to take it off, such as like a reductive technique, then we can do that with the mineral spirits and something like a Q-tip or another brush. And then you need to give it around 24 to 48 hours to fully cure, and most enamels tend to dry to like a matte finish, but with some of the special effects ones that we've got here from the Grimdark Compendium and Villainy inks, then we can achieve different surface finish variation, which means that we can alter the actual enamel itself to dry more of like a glossy or a satin finish. And some of the Villainy inks do have unique special effects properties, which is not something that you don't really see on market out there today, especially aimed at like flesh and colours that we've got here. You don't tend to sort of see these like flesh colours in any other range. So for this, obviously sometimes we get something like a Citadel wash, which is what we've been using for our filters, and it'll go into all the crevices, and then that's it, sort of done and permanent. But with this, we're going to apply it via airbrush, because you can do it via brush or an airbrush. I use an airbrush. A lot of people ask, you know, what's the reason you use an airbrush, especially for a unifying wash where it's just all over the miniature, and this is going to act as some general like grime, dirt, dust and grit and just like awful dirty pores that are going to build up on the miniature, and then we're just going to go ahead and apply that with an airbrush, because you get one like nice smooth even coat, and then towards the bottom of the legs where the dirt's going to be more naturally accumulated, that's when I can apply it a little bit further with a couple more layers. Now with the removal process as well, obviously I'm going around with a Q-tip, but then I'll also switch to my brush to get to some of the like harder reach areas, and that means that I can also start to streak it down as though this guy's like been sweating, or there's just like mucus coming out of his pores and stuff, and that sweat has just accumulated into this awful dirty like horrible grimy colour, which the Goon's Grime is perfect for. Now let's move on to some of the more specific special effects enamels, and for this I'm using Ichor of the Damned on the Intestine, which is a black enamel wash. This is great for doing some like panel linings, but you will need to thin it with mineral spirits for that. But for this one I've just got it straight out of the bottle, laid it on my tile, and I've applied it all over like the intestine areas, in and around the mouth, any little sores, and making sure that it runs into the eyes. Now the reason I've applied it neat is because Ichor of the Damned is designed to, when it dries more on the satin side. However, we can knock that back a little bit when we come into our removal process, just catching those raised edges. I'm not too fussed about removing too much of it, and I just create a couple of streaks, but this is going to act as like a really nice like dark shadow, like ichors and just awful stuff coming out of these intestines. God knows what this guy's eating, but yeah, because it's got that nice satin finish, it's going to give the appearance of like a wet look, which, you know, intestines I presume naturally would, and it also contrasts nice against that like dry, awful, like gritty, dusty skin. Next up, we're going to move on to probably my most favouriteest enamel out of the Villainy range, which is the Carrion Crimson. It's like a special effects one that's designed for skin and gore effects, and what's really nice about it, it has these like little tiny pigmented particles which will leave like a residue onto your skin, creating further mottling and gore effects. Now for this, again, I've got it straight out of the pot, so this is just applied neat, and then I'm going to get some mineral spirits on my brush and just start to manipulate it and move it around, and just move some of those chunks around into areas that I need to do, and also feather out and soften some of those edges to create some nice mottled transitions. But again, there's no enamel that I've seen like this out there before that's designed for this, and it is perfect for when you're creating any of the other Grimdark stuff. And I highly recommend researching this one, because people want resources pages stuff. I've come up with some really nice alternative techniques where you can use these enamels. Really quickly, a really nice Grimdark recipe for some like cloth or just like clothing or robes is to use Decay of Death. It's just a one coat application, so obviously we've got our brown on there, and then I'm going to come in with the Decay of Death, just let that build up all over the clothes. And now to get this like extra dusty, because this one is a special effects one, it dries really dusty and really matte. But to speed that up and aid it, I get my air dryer, like a blow dryer, and with some heat I just literally fire it all over, and that increases like the drying time and how matte it is going to go once it has complete. And when you're done, you've got this nice dusty, awful, grim looking like cloth, and it's perfect if you're painting some armies and you just want to get some nice Grimdark cloth down really quick. If they've got some capes or robes and stuff, then this is just like a two thing. You get your base coat down, put this over top, and you are good to go. Now there are just a couple of extra things that I did to finish this miniature off, and that was get Abtalon 502 Smoke Black, and for this I've just created some like drips and some ichors coming down like from like sores and pus and stuff, and again this just adds overall to that like gore and just awfulness that might be seeping out of this awful creature, and then it was just a case of getting some dirty downwards rust and applying it to any of the metallic areas, and this will give us like a really nice rusty looking like flail or like a sword or an axe or whatever this thing is that this guy's picked up. He's clearly not bothered about it, and if you want you can give it a dry brush just on the sharp edges of your favorite metallic silver paint just to top it off as though he's been chopping up people. And then if you want you can finally add some blood for the blood glod. It's just some additional extra like spatter or blood in and around the miniature. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial. Again, I know I've only just scratched the surface with this really easy, quick and effective colour recipe, and I hope you've been able to learn something a little bit more about the enamels. But again, this is just scratching, and I mean just scratching the surface of what is possible with the Villainy inks range and some of the other products. So I'd highly recommend jumping over to the Grimdark Compendium and checking out the Crimson Grove course to get the best and look at some of the other amazing technical techniques and special effects that you can create within your Grimdark miniature painting. So thanks again for coming along. If you have enjoyed this video, it really helped me out if you could just take 1 second. That's all it takes, is a little thank you to me. Hit that like button, it helps me get this video out there so that more people can see it. And if you've not already and you want to check out some of my other videos, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. Until next time guys, I will catch you in my next video. Sneak peek, Lionel Johnson.